Welcome to another edition of the Daily Deuce. I'm Gary Graves from just outside Louisville, Kentucky. And in Maryland, my longtime friend, esteemed colleague, John Webster. John, how are you doing this wonderful fall evening?
Doing great, man. Good weather here. Starting to get a little change in season now. The leaves are coming down. The wind is picking up. So it's a beautiful time. And to make it even more beautiful, all sorts of sports going on. And that makes it even better. But before we go too far, we'd be remiss if we didn't say hey to the main man, John Pitt. What's happening?
Hey, man, I just want to remind our viewers, if you look at the results in the Professional Football League over the weekend, this is why you don't gamble on the NFL games, period.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, no
Don't
doubt.
do it. Do not do it.
It's like I had the pleasure of listening to more games and watching them, and every game I listened to was compelling. I was out. I was at basketball practices pretty much all day Sunday. So, yeah, I listened to a lot of stuff on satellite radio. So I listened to the 49ers game, the Eagles Jets game. I'm trying to think. Yeah, well, those are probably the two most compelling games, and yeah. I was thinking about gamblers, and I know John Pitt. We have talked about what do they call those things? Not just bad bets, but what is that term now? Bad beats. And there were some bad beats in those two games. I mean, that's what makes me glad I don't bet on NFL games. But speaking of NFL, John, let's just get right into it. Okay. If you're a Washington or Dallas fan, you're happy. If you're a New York or Philadelphia fan, you're upset. And you're upset because of the way that those two teams lost. But if you're fans of the Washington and Dallas teams, then you're pretty happy, especially if you're a Dallas fan, and one of which who shall remain nameless on this broadcast.
It was interesting. I mean, we can start first with Philadelphia and the Giants. The Giants, by all rights and purposes, should have won the game. They didn't have great clock management at the end of the first half. This is the first time I've seen a game where the last play of the first half and the last play of the game ended up on the 1 yard line for the same team, and they failed to score in both situations. I can't remember seeing something like that. In the first half, Giants on the 1 yard line, and they called a running play. I get the feeling that that's not what Dable wanted to be called, but they called it, gave the ball to Barkley. He got stopped, and then, of course, he couldn't get back up off the ground. They couldn't get themselves lined up fast enough. And then in the first half, you don't get a touchdown, you don't get a field goal, you get nothing. End of the game, and that played an important part for end of the game because they're losing 14-9. They're driving down the field, and again, they get to the one. You go back to the first half at the end, if they get that field goal, it's 14-12, and all they need is a field goal to win the game 15-14. But since they didn't get that, they needed a touchdown. Threw the ball in the end zone. I think it was Darren Waller was not able to catch it. And you can see the defensive back pulling his arm down. But hey, it is what it is. And I tell, before you start complaining about a referee, think about, did you do everything you could to win the game? And if New York had been able to kick a field goal in the first half, you're kicking a field goal into the game instead of doing for a touchdown. So, it all balances out.
Yeah.
Philadelphia losing to the Jets. The Jets have a lights-out defense. Quinnen Williams, and can't think of some of the other guys' name. Is it Sauce Gardner? Is that his name? The cornerback?
Sauce Gardner. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they have a lights-out defense. And the thing that they were able to do, the defense held Philadelphia in check. And the offense was able to, they got 20 points. That's going to have to be the recipe for winning the rest of the year for them, or until Aaron Rodgers is able to come back.
Yeah.
I said in the beginning of the year, and I will still say it, Philadelphia will not win the NFC East. I've said it before, and I will continue to say it. They will not win the NFC East. They have a harder time scoring now. Jalen Hurts threw 3 interceptions on Sunday. The defense is not the same defense that it was last year. And it's not so much that Philadelphia's not a good team. They're a very good team. But it is very hard to repeat in the NFC East. Hadn't happened, as I've said before, in over 20 years. And I still say it's not going to happen this year.
John, I'd like to agree with you, but I can't because I can't trust Washington or Dallas to overtake them. Just can't. I think that you put Philly up against those two teams right now, and they had to play both of them, let's just say over the next month or so, that they probably win, I'd say 3 out of those 4 games and still be on top, because you just never know what you're going to get from week to week with Washington or the Dallas Cowboys. Now, again, they came close to losing that game last night, or I'll say it like this. They were in a battle against a so-so San Diego Chargers team last night, but won. I woke up and heard the score this morning because I dozed off on it. And as much as I want to try to believe in Dallas, I just can't. It's just right now, like this weekend in general was just kind of a bizarro weekend. It must have been like, what is it? They called it that fire eclipse or something like that. And you just had some bizarre games. San Francisco goes to Cleveland and loses. Okay. Granted, they had injuries, but they go into Cleveland, they should have beat them. Since you were talking about lights out defense, Cleveland's defense is just flat out nasty. I mean, they are just flat out nasty. I listened to that game and the announcers, and I was flipping between both telecasts, and it was like every time I was listening to 49ers broadcast, and you could just hear their announcers just going, ooh, every time one of them took a hit, especially like, when Deebo Samuel, got hit, even before he went out, they were lighting him up. They were just absolutely lighting him up. Cleveland is going to have to win with his defense, but we're talking about the NFC East, so I'll shift back to that. Good for Dallas that they won yesterday because they needed it. Good for Washington that they won because they really needed it. What that means in the division, I don't know. Of course, it helps, but I still think, John, the line forms behind Philly, and those two teams in particular have to show me they are capable of beating Philadelphia once, let alone twice.
Well, Gary, you make good points. One thing I know we agree on: the Giants will be in last place. I think we both can agree on that. I don't see any place other than.
And they might be a 500 team in last place. That's the whole thing. It's a long season, and
but
they can get it together, but they'll be far off the pace.
I'm looking at Philadelphia's schedule. So they have Miami this week. Then they play the Commanders at DC. Then they play Dallas. Then they play Kansas City. Then they play Buffalo. Then they play San Francisco, at Dallas, at Seattle. And then they end the season with the Giants, Arizona, and the Giants again. So, and I know I'm in a minority for thinking like this, but I can see Philadelphia going into a mini slump right about now. I can see them losing a few games, and that NFC East will be tighter than it's anticipated. I'll say this. I'm not saying Philadelphia on paper doesn't have the best team, but paper doesn't win the games. You got to go on the field, and they have injuries, and I still say they're not the same team. I'll see what happens when they play it out, but we'll go from there.
Yeah, and here's why I disagree with you. Looking at that schedule that you just read, John, I don't see one team in there that you can look at as a guaranteed win for Kansas City, or I'll say it like this. For Philly, I still feel like looking at that schedule and looking at how some of these teams are playing right now, they're about as even as can be. Kansas City is not the same team. We are seeing that. They're still a team, they're still formidable, but they are not the same team as last year. It's off, part of it is offense, but they're going to have to win with their defense, and that might be their saving grace. But the offense definitely isn't the same. Andy Reid he's got to take over more of the play calling, because from what I see, it's not the same offense that can get the same kind of yards or get the points like you could depend on last year. It's going to be a more grinded out team this year for whatever reason. I don't want to say it's the loss of Eric Bieniemy or whatever, who helped devise the system, but Seattle, I think everybody came down to earth. Everybody fell back in the pack this weekend. Last week, we were ready to basically anoint San Francisco as the best team in the NFC, and they go up there and they just get beat up in Cleveland. The only team that I think is the favorite right now, and that's just this week, are the Detroit Lions. And that that's just the way that it is. But I still think Philly will figure it out. Again, it has more to do with the attrition than dominance or anything. And I just think they could still be atop that division by attrition, because you never know what you're going to get from week to week out of the Cowboys or the Commanders.
Yeah, but I just don't see it the same way you do, Gary. I don't see Philadelphia winning it. I don't see them as the same team they were last year. I think they are a good team, and I still say that, but they're not what they were last year. Some of these games are just called off to you. Yeah, even. They can be even. But some of those breaks they used to have last year with the evens, I don't think they're going to have them this year. I think they are going to fall back some, and I think some of these teams are going to beat them. You don't always get the breaks every year. Everything doesn't always go your way. Remember one year when they were a different Washington team under Joe Gibbs, they went to the Super Bowl, and the next year they came back and they had a plus 45 turnover ratio. That's absolutely unheard of. I don't even know if anybody's done that since then. And they didn't win the Super Bowl, but my point is not so much that, but things changed, because the next year they were more like a plus 10 or plus 5. Things change each year. And my point is, things are going to change for Philadelphia. The breaks they got last year, the things they made happen, I don't see it this year.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm wrong, hey, I'm wrong.
Yeah. Well, again, that's why they play the games, John, and that's why we talk about them, because it's fun. And you make a good point, because it is hard to repeat. Teams adjust to the power team. They start building their rosters to beat the power team, at least those 8 to 10 teams in the NFL that are concerned about going to the playoffs every year and winning a championship. That's another discussion. But I also think Philly is still deep enough to figure it out, to get better, to adjust to how teams have adjusted to them, and win. Dallas, I still say they have to just show me. And I've said before, the NFL needs Dallas to be relevant and successful, because rising tide lifts all boats. You need that, much like you need the New York Yankees in baseball, or the Lakers and the Celtics in the NBA. Golden State is what it is. They're always going to be there, in my opinion. But in the NFL, Dallas has got to show us every week that they're capable, and they're just not there. Washington is a hope team, and you can't have hope if you're going to win a division. I mean, you can hope you win it, but just hoping that everything falls into place for them. No, that's not it. You have to know that your team is gonna be there week in and week out. And I still think you can depend on Philly more often than not than any of those other teams in the division. And I love the NFC East, don't get me wrong.
And you just mentioned Dallas. That's a nice segue into talking about the Cowboys and the Commanders.
Well, well, continue because I mean, give me something to think about when but between those two teams, something to look forward to.
Well, I'll say this for the Cowboys: great win for them last night. They beat San Diego. It's a great way to go into the bye. They're 4-2 as opposed to being 3-3. Also, I saw something in Dak Prescott last night I haven't seen a lot of. I've always talked about he needs to use his legs. 7 carries last night for 40 yards. Even had an 18-yard touchdown run. I think they showed some things. The thing is, will they continue? When they come off the bye, they play the Rams. They need to beat the Rams. You don't need to come off your bye and be flat. San Diego, you and Pitt both know I'm not a big San Diego Chargers fan. I just think the coach there is too much about analytics and just what I call them? San Diego Chargers. Pitt just correct me. Thanks, John. LA Chargers. I call them San Diego. I'm still living in the Don Coryell days, man. I'm sorry. But LA Chargers. I just don't. It's too much analytics with the coach. I just don't like how they play. I really don't. They're just. And I don't want to say a lot about them because I don't want to take away from what the Cowboys did last night. It was a very good win. Micah Parsons came up with a key sack at the end of the game. Gilmore came up with the interception to seal it. You can't take anything away from it. Now, this last team for the NFC, the team they call the Commanders, they had a big win on Sunday. They beat the Atlanta Falcons. Couple things that I see. I've said this from the beginning. I do not think they rely enough on the run. I think they need to do more running. They had a couple plays in the second half where it's like 4 minutes left in the game, you're up by 7, and it's 1st and 10, and you throw a pass and it's incomplete. Incomplete means the clock stops. You didn't eat any time up. Bieniemy, what I want to say, I don't want to knock Eric Bieniemy. I don't want to do that. But what I will say is
criticism is fair, John. If it's fair.
I just want to watch how I say it, Gary. I think he does a good job, but I think sometimes he may think he still has the same weapons that he had in Kansas City. And you don't have the same weapons, and weapons to me is also an offensive line. And that's definitely not the same. That line that you have in Washington is more equipped for a run. And again, Gary, this is the NFC East. It's not the AFC West. It's ground and pound. That's what it is. The weather gets cold. You got to have a good running game. And I think that's what they do. I think, like last year we talked about it, and I said they could beat Philadelphia. And they did. And the biggest reason they beat them was because they grinded them to death and kept Jalen Hurts on the bench. Washington has the ability to do some damage. Now I know I'm getting ready to be in the minority. Next thing we're going to say now, Gary. Jack Del Rio made some good adjustments. I hear so many people here in the DMV, they really don't like Jack Del Rio. They have negative things to say about him. But he made some adjustments. So the passes and the pass plays with the defensive backfield he had, everything was in front of them. Very little got behind them. And when they caught it, they put a good hit on, a good fair hit, nothing illegal. That front four is tough.
Yeah.
The secondary, they're going to have to continue to get better. Matter of fact, the kid Forbes, they didn't even play him Sunday. They played Danny Johnson, and Johnson did well. But Forbes, I still say he's going to be good. You just got to give him time. You got to keep working with him. And that defensive secondary has to continue to grow and get better. Good win for them. They got the Giants this week, which scares me because they never play well against the Giants. And they're going to the Meadowlands, which they definitely never play well in the Meadowlands. Mm-hmm. So I still stick with them. I still think they can do some things, and we'll see, Gary.
Yeah. Well, John, the key word you mentioned was adjust. And that's the difference between how Jack Del Rio helped win the game for him, going by what you say, because I'm going to watch the replay later on tonight. The problem, I'd say, sometimes with Washington and what you were talking about with Bieniemy and the ground game, that more often than not, or I'll say sometimes, I'll change it to say sometimes, coordinators are so locked in on winning with a certain strategy that they're so determined to win a certain way that they fail to realize or recognize when something isn't there, and they don't adjust at halftime. They just say, okay, we're going to keep trying this because they can't defend it forever. And yeah, sometimes they do. Jack Del Rio had no choice but to adjust after your defense got its teeth kicked in for 3 games in a row. So, something had to give with that. That's my opinion. I'll watch the replay, and we'll text about that. But good for them. I'm not even going to say anything about the Falcons and the quality of win, because right now with Washington, a win is a win. And let's just accept it and get ready for the New York Giants. All right, John. The playoffs in baseball. We're in the championship series now, and I don't know what to make of the Houston Astros right now, the Houston Astros chances, because they're down 0-2. I didn't get a chance to catch all of the game last night, but I think they were down 4-0 going into the bottom of the first before they even had a chance to bat. There's part of me that wants to say the Texas Rangers are a team of destiny because they've beaten the Orioles. They've who else did they just beat? Or was it just I guess it was the Orioles.
They beat Tampa Bay.
Tampa Bay, that's right. So, they look like that team of destiny. Their pitching is coming together. Well, they're keeping it together as much as possible. They've got Scherzer available if they need it, but I'm not quite ready to count out the Houston Astros, even being down 2-0, because you go on the road, and I think about the situation they faced when they played the Nationals in the World Series. The Nationals looked like they were prepared to sweep them. And they come into Washington and sweep all 3 games and send it back to Texas. They've got their work cut out for them because the Rangers are playing with house money, and they're confident, and they basically have just ignored that what is it, 7-1 or 6-1 record against the Astros, or the domination, I'll say, the overall series domination. I think they were 1-6 against the Astros at home, and that's why you can't count out Houston. But the thing I love about this series, John, is that you just never know. And I would have had that pegged for an Astros sweep, maybe 5 games, but here we are.
Well, it's going to be interesting. One of their thoughts is that the Astros played better on the road this year.
Mm-hmm.
I hope and pray that is true, Gary, because they got to play a lot better right now. Yesterday, the first 4 batters for Texas got on base, and they had 4 runs. It was 4-0, like you say, by the bottom of the first inning. Texas is a professional hitting team. They got another great pitching effort from Nathan Eovaldi. I think he went 8 innings yesterday, 7 or 8 innings. It was really good what he did. No, he went 7 innings because Chapman came in the 8th.
Right.
and then Leclerc closed them out. Interesting fact, 3 interesting facts about the Rangers. They have not lost a playoff game. They are undefeated. They have only had one playoff game at home.
I forgot about
and
that.
For
Yeah.
And for 9 times 3, 20, no, more than that. How many games? Two, 3, that's 5. 5 and 2, 7. Seven
So yeah,
times
they won
9 is 63.
seven straight playoff games.
Yeah,
Yeah.
63 innings. They have been behind for one half of an inning for 63 innings. They were behind to the Orioles 2-0 going into the second inning, and then they scored 5 runs. So they're lights out tough. I'm hoping Houston and Dusty can get it together, but they're just so good, Gary. I mean, the outfield is solid. They're making great infield plays with Corey Seager in there. They're just, and then the pitching, they got Scherzer back now. You got Evaldi. And this kid, Evan Carter.
Mm-hmm.
They're just really, really a solid team. Pitching, fielding, and relief. And their weakest point is relieving. And the relievers have been doing a great job.
Mm-hmm.
Normally you can rock them, because the thing was you wanted to get to the Rangers before the 8th inning, because the 8th inning was Chapman and Leclerc. Now the relievers are doing it.
Yeah. Well, reading the stories, it's quite apparent that the Houston Astros need to get more bats cranked besides Yordan Alvarez, because I mean, the rest of that lineup is all of a sudden, well, they've been shut down by Texas pitching. You can't win a game with that. You're certainly not going to win a 7-game series with that. And I mean, Yordan Alvarez is just not going to cover off the ball. I mean, he's hitting about as well as any power hitter can play right now. But right now, he needs support. That's what I think they need to get away. They need to go on the road and kind of just let it all hang out, which they seem to do, really, really well. They play less pressure on the road, which is to say, really, they face no pressure on the road, because it's just something, sometimes with teams that just do that they just play better away from home. They feel like they have to win in front of the home fans. They feel like because they're in familiar surroundings that that it's just going to work out for them, and sometimes it doesn't. And baseball being funny, sometimes you just find that knack on the road.
Yeah, what you need to do to break up their momentum, but you can't have it in Texas because it's a dome. You need a rain out. They just break up so they can just slow down a little bit. You can't get that in Texas,
man.
Huh?
Sounds like something out of Bull Durham.
Well, you need that, and then also you got to know the runners. You make your infield muddy. They can't really steal bases that way, but hats off to them, Gary. They're just unbelievable right now, man.
Yeah.
And they took the Orioles out. Everybody knows how I feel about the Orioles. I can't do anything but say, better team won. Congratulations to them. That's all I can say.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, John, how the light switch goes on for some teams in October. And the Philadelphia Phillies are a perfect example in the National League. They're up 1-0 on the Arizona Diamondbacks, but they were a team that I thought would be kind of, one and done, so to speak. And, and here they are almost on the verge of heading back to the World Series again. And I'll use the same term. They might be a team of destiny. I can't say anything bad about Bryce Harper. I mean, not at all. When he left for Philadelphia, I can't say that I was mad at him. I think I was probably more mad, and a lot of Nationals fans were more mad at his agent for
Mhm.
essentially holding him over a barrel, holding the Nationals over a barrel like he does with other teams, but he's just doing what he does. I do think Bryce Harper, now that he's healthy, even though he took like kind of a bad hit on that one play in the last series, but now that he's healthy, you see pretty much the best player in baseball right now. Just and I'll go ahead and say it, with all due respect to Shohei Ohtani and trying to think of who else we're talking about, as the best player. But right now, Bryce Harper, I think, is showing himself to be the best player in baseball. He's gritty. He hits with power. He's playing with an edge. And I've seen countless stories in the last week that he is playing Philadelphia type baseball. And it's not so much the Phillies type baseball, but he is playing the way a Philadelphia athlete plays, gritty. He doesn't care what anybody thinks. He's going to speak his mind, and he's going to shove it in your face. And you got to love it.
He's doing great, man. He's fun to watch. He reminds me, and I'm really going back now.
Mm-hmm.
He reminds me of Pete Rose because he's always hustling. Every play he gives everything he has. Whether he's going for a ground out at first base, whether he's trying to break up a double play, he don't play the outfield now. Now he's playing first base. He gives it everything he has, no matter what he's doing. Last night he hit a tater, hit a home run. Happy birthday to him because yesterday was his birthday as well. He's and I agree with you, Gary. He fits in Philadelphia. Cheesesteaks and Bryce Harper. They go hand in hand. They go hand in hand.
John, I
So
didn't expect that, but okay, it makes sense.
I mean, he's really it's. And I'm not really up on the Nationals. I'm an Orioles guy, but it's unfortunate he wasn't able to stay with the
He was never going to
Nationals.
stay. Yeah, he was never going to stay. No matter how
It's
much money
unfortunate though. It's unfortunate because you look at Harper's there, Trey Turner's there, and they're two cornerstones of what the Nats used to have.
Oh,
And then
and
you go across.
and Kyle Schwarber's there. I mean, he had a
Yeah,
cup of coffee in Washington.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
by extension, yeah, that's like three former Nationals there.
yeah.
Either by choice or by circumstance. And
I love Schwarber. You know who Schwarber reminds me of? Schwarber. If I messed his name up, I apologize. He reminds me of, Gary?
who's that? Boog Powell.
No, I'm going to stay in the Phillies organization for this one.
Oh, Mike Luzinski. I mean, I'm sorry, Greg Luzinski. I'm thinking of Mike Schmidt. No, Greg Luzinski.
Yeah, yes, but I got one more. I hadn't thought of Luzinski, but how about this one? John Kruk.
Amen. I agree.
I mean, when you look at Schwarber, and you remember that Philadelphia Phillies team they had back then, they called them, they looked like a bunch of softball players. You remember that? They lost to Toronto in the World Series.
Yeah,
It was a great
93.
World Series.
Yeah, Joe
But
Carter.
that's Schwarber. I done called him three different ways, man. Eventually I get his name right hopefully before the show
I hope
goes
nobody
on.
from Philly is watching this. They're gonna be mad at both of us. The
But
Phillies used to be my team, believe it or not.
oh,
But, after the Senators left, I was a Phillies fan for a while before I embraced the Orioles, and that's just one of those things. I just embraced the teams that were closest to me eventually. But
well, I have what I see for the World Series. I'm looking at a repeat. I'm looking at Houston and Philadelphia. I'm still holding out hope that the Astros get it turned around. So I'm going Philadelphia, Houston.
okay, I can see that happening. I hope it happens because really for Harper and Turner and Schwarber, for the three former Nats, really for Philly in general, this is a team that they on paper, I'll say at first glance, they seem like the team least likely to win a World Series, but but again, here they are. I always feel like teams that play more with an edge and have more to lose always play better. And I think that's what you're seeing with Philly. Maybe that's what you're seeing with the Texas Rangers. But again, you've got to beat you got to beat the best. And the Houston Astros still are what they are. They're well managed. They've got situational guys. They just have to really pull it together. And I think one win for them, if they can win Game 3, it can change the series drastically. That's a very pivotal game for them. In baseball, Game 3 is less pivotal than say Game 3 in basketball. But in their case, it's you'd rather be down 1-2 than down 0-3 in a series like that. All right, John, we're moving back to football, but moving down a level to the NCAA. I know you're happy because your Notre Dame Fighting Irish got off the mat and they beat USC. We had actually we had some better than expected games this past weekend with Alabama getting pushed by Arkansas. I covered a collapse, a Lexington collapse, but credit Missouri for really getting it together and turning it around on a fake punt. I don't know if you saw that highlight or not, but they're down 14-0 and they're about to punt, and the punter just throws this basically a jump ball pass for a touchdown. And that turned the whole game around for them, and they dominated Kentucky for those final 3 periods. But your Fighting Irish really needed a win like that. They pretty much, I think, ended Caleb Williams' hopes of repeating as a Heisman Trophy winner. It's a long season, but I think they provided a blueprint on how to shut them down. And again, the Irish are they're down, but they're never out. So I can't discount them. You still have 2 more weeks before the first power rankings come on. And if they can get close to the top 10, anything can happen in that final month, even against that schedule.
Yeah, well, good win for them. You're absolutely right. Good win, way to bounce back. I'm thinking more New Year's Day Bowl than I am playoff. Right now, I think they're 13th or 14th in the country, I think. Next 4 games are Pitt, Clemson, Wake Forest, and Stanford. Mm-hmm. They're home against Pitt. They're at Clemson. And the funny thing is, Gary, this is the worst kept secret in the world. You look and it says at Clemson, to be determined for game time. You know, I know that's going to be a night game at Death Valley.
You think NBC is going to waste that opportunity? I mean, what are they going to do? Put NASCAR on Saturday night in that place?
Yeah, that's going to be a night game. And then they have Wake Forest. To be tough. ACC plays them hard. And then I've always said, when they have the game against Stanford, when they go to Stanford, it's always Thanksgiving weekend. And at Stanford, even though they're not great, they're not bad. I mean, if you saw them play,
they showed that against Colorado.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you saw them play against Colorado, they never gave up. They kept playing, and they won in overtime. Mm-hmm. I'll say this. You mentioned Kentucky. My personal opinion, I think Kentucky and Maryland both had the same thing this weekend. I think they both had hangover. Kentucky after having a rough game against Georgia, Maryland after having a rough game against Ohio State. Maryland lost their homecoming to Illinois this past weekend.
I know. Yeah, and that's inexcusable as an alum. No, you
and I know you're an alum, and I'm not bringing it up to try to dig on you, but
John, it is what it is. I don't take it personally. I feel like no matter who you are, you don't lose your homecoming game. But I'll say, if you're Vanderbilt, you don't schedule Georgia for homecoming, so to speak. They didn't do that. I mean, not crazy.
I did a quick story. I did a football game a couple weeks ago, and I won't mention the school, but I do the clock for high school football, which everybody knows. So the game I had. It was on September 30th, I'll give the date, and it was homecoming. So homecoming in September, Gary. That's quite a push. Homecoming in September for high school football. And at halftime, the school that was the home team was down 22-6 or 32-12 at halftime. So the athletic director came up in the booth and I asked him, "Hey man, y'all always do homecoming this early?" He said, "Well, the coach wanted to play somebody he thought they could beat. You're losing 32-12 at halftime. You really couldn't have thought you could beat this team, really?" It goes back to what you're saying about Vanderbilt scheduling Kentucky. You really want to make sure you schedule somebody on your homecoming game that you're going to beat. Maryland had Illinois. The last thing I thought in my mind was they're going to lose to Illinois. That never crossed my mind. Not to Illinois, but I think the game against Ohio State took a lot out of them. And I think the game against Georgia took a lot out of Kentucky. And I think that's why you have losses in both of those games. And Maryland next year, what I suggest Maryland do, I suggest this to all schools. Maryland plays early games, and like all schools, you play these games, Towson or Virginia, beginning of the season. Mm-hmm. Don't play them at the beginning. Take one of those games and put it as a homecoming game.
Yeah.
Move it to the middle of the season because, you need to win your homecoming. You got Gary Graves, another alumni coming back. You need to win your homecoming. That's right. Very important.
That's right. Yeah,
that's very important.
Yeah. Well, what's funny about Kentucky, when they scheduled, when Missouri was scheduled, I think at the time it looked like a decent homecoming opponent because Missouri had been kind of so-so, for that matter. So was Kentucky, but both of them entered the game 5-1. Missouri was coming off a tough loss to LSU. They gave up 14 points in the final 3 minutes, lost a winnable game. They were hurting. Kentucky, both of them were thinking redemption. And, Kentucky goes and jumps out to a 14-point lead. They're looking inspired. But, John, I'm telling you, I've never seen a game where a trick play shifted momentum the way that it did for good. It's one thing. I can't even say Kentucky got caught with their pants down on that because they had a defender back on that pass. It was just a jump ball. It was just out of the defender's reach. The guy, just went up for it. And it was just, like I said, a gift touchdown. But something flipped the switch for Missouri, for the Tigers. And I'm telling you, they just hit Kentucky in the mouth after that. Kentucky was undisciplined. They were flummoxed. They couldn't do anything. And I think they got to a point where they were pressing. And when you press, that's when you start to make mistakes. But they just had no answer for Missouri, and that was a game that they had to have. And I guess right now, the bye comes up at a good time for them where they can adjust because it doesn't get any easier because Kentucky has Tennessee next week. I think they have Mississippi State the week after that. Then they've got Alabama coming in the second week of November. So you've got two ranked teams. And, of course, going down to Stark Vegas is no gimme either, no matter how rough it's been for Mississippi State, which, by the way, won its homecoming game because they scheduled somebody they should beat. So, that's a lesson for Kentucky going forward. If you're going to have a homecoming game, schedule somebody you can beat. That's when you play the Eastern Kentuckys, which of course kind of pushed them a little bit. But like I said, you give the fans and alumni something good to feel good about. So, John, I'm trying to think now, what do we have coming up this week? Oh, wait a minute. NBA. By the time we meet again, the NBA will be getting ready to start. Hockey's already started. I think we're only about a week away from the first college football playoff rankings, but the NBA starts up, and I'm really looking forward to the beginning of NBA season because with Damian Lillard in Milwaukee, I think the Eastern Conference is going to be really, really competitive and interesting. I root for the Boston Celtics. Yes, I am a Washington Wizards fan, but I'm rooting for the Boston Celtics because I go back to what I said before. They need to be relevant. They need to play for a title. Um, and I think the Eastern Conference might be the most interesting in terms of competition. The West is what it is. It's just going to be a flat out battle between 8 to 10 teams. But the East, I think, is really going to be interesting now with some of the power shifts. I don't know where Philadelphia fits into that mix. I don't even think Philly knows where they're going to fit into that mix with some of the issues they have there.
Gary, I'm just excited. Love my Celtics, man. I'm looking forward to it.
Mm-hmm.
Out west, Golden State, want to see them do it, and I think they're going to be really good in the playoffs because Chris Paul has never been on a team that has not done well in the regular season. He's always had those teams playing well. The struggle comes for them when they get to the playoffs. Will they be too small? You got Chris Paul, you got Klay Thompson, you got Steph Curry. And plus, Steph Curry and Klay Thompson are getting up in age just like Draymond Green is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very small lineup, very small. So
and a very old lineup too.
Yeah. And Draymond Green is already hurt.
Yeah, he's going to miss what, 2 more exhibition games or something, maybe the opener. So yeah. Hey, before we go, the rankings came out yesterday. Kansas is #1 in the men's poll. LSU is #1 in the women's poll that came out today. How do you
talking about basketball, right? You're talking about basketball.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Kansas, which avoided probation. Well, they avoided sanctions. They're #1. And LSU, returning champ, added Haley Van Lith and I'm trying to think of the player from DePaul. I think it was Anissa Morgan from DePaul. They've what is it? They have restocked, not rebuilt.
Reloaded.
Thank you.
Kim Mulkey she's got a cooker down there again. And they have this one.
It's harder though because now you've got the target on your back. Last year when you're playing with 7 transfers, and you're just trying to see where things go. They got if anybody can get something out of 7 transfers in 1 year, it's her. And you saw how that ended for them. But now you're the target, you're the hunted. So let's see how they react with a reloaded roster. But folks, watch sports. This is why we talk about it. You watch sports because you love it. Some of you watch it because you place bets on it. But for whatever reason, watch sports. There's plenty of choices. It's a release from your everyday life. We just hope that you have your opinion that you share with your friends, like me and John share our opinions with each other. We'll see you next week, John. Take us home.
Hey, Gary, it's been another great week of sports. I've enjoyed the conversation with you. Everybody, watch some sports. Gary gave you great examples of some things you want to watch, whether it be hockey, women's college basketball, men's college basketball, the NBA, the NFL,
WNBA,
baseball, WNBA. The Liberty are playing tonight, I think, against the Aces. Also, baseball. Watch it. Watch it and enjoy it. And we're going to see you all again real soon.